it's time for our speaker, who is Ray today, and he's going to help us to understand Unitarianism and where does it come from.
Ha! I really enjoyed trying to get ready for today. What I discovered is, I believe, that Unitarians do not even agree on a shared history. It's amazing. I think I could really like these folks. Is anybody having any trouble hearing me? Because I'll put on the lapel mic if you like.
It's good. It's very good. It's
okay,
good.
So imagine this.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
What two things do vampires and Unitarians have in common? What two things do Unitarians and vampires have in common?
We're both thirsty.
From Romania.
They came out of Transylvania.
They came out of Transylvania, and they have a peculiar aversion to the cross. And it must be true because it's on a CUC website.
And what is the CUC? Not everybody knows.
CUC is the Canadian Unitarian, and I'm not quite sure how Universalist fits in there, but the Canadian Universalist, Canadian Unitarian Council. So it is the modern source of all things Canadian and Unitarian, provided to us by God.
Excuse me?
Google.
Oh.
For those of us who are searching. Anyway. All right, so this, I believe, will fit in well. What after all of my research, I will describe as an ancient Unitarian story that does not come from North America. It does not come from Transylvania. It does not come from Poland. There's some belief that Unitarianism and the Universalists managed to come out of Poland, Transylvania, America. What's the fourth one? England, I think. But the thing that's most fascinating about it is that the folks who call themselves historians do not agree that any one of those four places had any influence on the development of the beliefs that became Unitarian. In other words, it happened independently. In much the same way that some historians say the wheel did not happen in one place and then get shared around the world, but a whole bunch of folks in different places noticed when you load something heavy on top of something round, like some logs, you can build pyramids. Or something like that. Now, if you are confused, you are not the first people to be confused by me. But there's this idea that this thing we call Unitarianism and Universalist Unitarianism does not have one path. It does not come from one place. In fact, it may come from several places at the same time. Which begs the question, do Unitarians pay attention to the essence behind belief? Is it possible that Christ, Muhammad, Buddha, Confucius, Michael Daly, Brian Zacharias, definitely Jerry Levinson, Shirley, my dear sweet wife.
Surely.
Shirley. I'm sorry, I meant my surly. All come from the same place that Unitarianism comes from. Interesting. So when you go to try and get the history of Unitarians and Universalists, it turns out that these concepts started brewing a long time ago. So this must be a Unitarian story. And it goes something like this. The person who told it when I first heard it did not know that they were a Unitarian. I am not sure that they know now that they are a Unitarian. I don't think that it comes from a culture of people who call themselves Unitarians, but I think it's a Unitarian story. And you can bear witness to it and see if you agree. Once upon a long, long time ago, the Lord of all lords, the one behind all that is, the Creator, the one who does not exist as a Trinity, was sitting in the garden, weeping. Weeping. For the Lord of all lords had lost something precious. It smashed. And the one who spends most of their time in the earthly planes of physicality and dual theory, without a website for wisdom, there was no Dan yet, saw the Lord of all lords weeping in the garden. And so this one responsible for the earthly realms sat next to the Lord of all lords and comfort. Sat there in comfort. And when enough time in silence had been held by both of them, the one from the earthly realms asked, "Please, Lord of all lords, great compassionate one, the wisdom behind the wise, why are you weeping?" And the wise one said, I had it in my hands. I had it here in my hands. And it slipped through my fingers and it smashed. And the one from the earthly realm said, "What is it that you had? What is it that you had?" "I had the jewel of truth, and it slipped through my hands and it fell all the way to earth." Now the one from the earth was kind of happy, actually. The jewel of all truth from all places had fallen to earth. And the one who is wise behind wisdom could tell that there was a little bit of smiling going on. He said, "Oh, dear earthly one, The problem you now have is that when the jewel of truth, of all truth, slipped through my fingers and fell to the earth and smashed into oh so many shards, a shard of truth landed in the heart of every man, woman, and child. And the birds began to sing, and flutes were played. Butterflies. And even though there's a shard of truth in the hearts of every man, woman, and child, they think they have the whole thing. And there will be chaos on the earth for a long, long time. Of all the looking through history that I did, that story sums up Unitarianism for me. There is somehow this notion that the shards of truth are hard to pull together. And it's even harder to see and feel if you're sitting next to somebody who is so closed in their heart, for whatever reason, that their truth is not in the world. So it makes me wonder about it. What are we doing? If we look into the history of Unitarianism, it said that if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it. Michael and I were talking the other day, and the funny thing is, if you do know history, you're bound to repeat it. It's like you aim at it somehow. So how many people out there? How many cultures? How many different places in the world aspire to concepts, beliefs, essence behind divinity that are similar to what it seems those folks who were in Christian congregations and went, I'm not comfortable. Is that a discomfort that is meant for me in my lifetime, or is there some other thing going on? And this was happening for both Protestants and Catholics. One of the really cool things when I was doing this research was they could point to one person who had as much influence as anybody else. It was a young woman born in 1547. She was so wise that her father, God forbid, taught her how to read. She could read by the age of 16. Then she studied all of the sciences. And she asked so many questions that she had to leave Italy during the Inquisition and go and hang out in Poland. Funny, huh? And I wonder, how many places are there? Not only in Canada, not only in the Western world, but in these other places where people are questing or feeling just a little bit uncomfortable in ways that maybe we weren't supposed to be uncomfortable, that we could grow into a new pair of shoes. Now, I don't recommend growing into a new suit the way that I have. I think I'm going to shrink into a new suit over the next year. But maybe that's part of it too. That it's not just expansion, but has something to do with contraction as well. I'm reminded of the Dagara people of West Africa, who don't know that some of them are Unitarians. But I'm sure they are. One of the core beliefs is that in order to be born, you are born with a gift. You are sent as a present, a gift to the village for something that the village has been asking for or something that the village has recognized we have a problem, but we don't even know what to ask for. So when you're born, the village knows you have a needed answer. You have a needed answer. This sounds like Unitarianism to me. It sounds like it. And they also know that if the village can't help you remember your gift, then your gift turns toxic. And it not only hurts you, but everyone around you. I now think Albert Einstein was a Unitarian. What did he say? He said, everybody's a genius. But if you're a fish, it doesn't make any sense to measure your genius by how well you climb trees. Albert Einstein, I think, is a Unitarian. Julie pointed me towards her website, her Facebook page. You did that great article. Unitarians changed the face of Christmas. Who's your favorite guy to those? There was 3 of them. I don't know if I can remember all of them. One of them, oh, one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite plays of all times, A Christmas Carol. Who wrote that? Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was a Unitarian. Professed. Yeah. Like he actually admitted it. Crazy bugger. And where did all of that story of bah humbugging? At one time, that was kind of okay. Who's the guy that wrote A Night Before Christmas? Peter Clement. Peter Clement. You're not going to believe this. He was a Unitarian. There is this idea that particularly in the Boston area, that people of affluence began to recognize 2 things. The drunken, promiscuous, debauchery, although fun, around the all-night festivals, around Christmas time, could actually be peace on earth, goodwill toward men. So there are some who believe that's a relatively new version of Christmas. And it comes from people like Clement Moore and Charles Dickens. And folks of affluence would recognize young people in the village through the townships and go, I know what that person needs. And they would run out to the blacksmith or to the candle shop or to the bakery or to the abattoir or whatever, and they would buy gifts for the kids. And the answer was, it must have come from Santa Claus. The folks who did that were Unitarians. One of my favorites, I love Christmas trees. And apparently, one of the big challenges was, what do you do with kids on Christmas Eve? Well, some bright Unitarian named Folin was the first person to cut down a tree, bring it inside, and put candles, burning candles, in a tree. Now, to me, this explains a lot about Unitarianism. We're nuts. Who would even think of doing such a thing? And that the beauty and the passion and the hinting of the essence behind where truth comes from captivated children and families. So I had a lot of fun trying to do the history of Unitarianism. Apparently the first one in Canada was in 1847, 57 I think it was. There's no evidence that Unitarianism in Canada sprang out of local beliefs, that it actually came from somewhere else, whether it be the States or England or possibly maybe Transylvania. But the thing I love about it is, why did it take root? I'm probably wrong, but I love the idea that our first form of government and something about our confederation has a lot to do with the Iroquois. And that way of having two wampum belts being side by side. Neither one less true than the other. So somehow, those visiting Unitarians managed to land in a place where out of the ground was already the idea that truth has many forms and is hard to understand. I don't think I have anything else to say. Does anybody have a favorite Unitarian story? Who's been to a Unitarian service? John and Ellie just came from.
You did.
Let me tell you my favorite part of that trip, or the story that you told them. My favorite part of what you said when we were talking was,
Okay.
it appeared like the minister was doing nothing.
That's true.
That's right.
But yeah, but we went to the Beacon Church last Sunday, and in New Westminster, and we met the minister, lovely woman, Deb Thorne, and she didn't say anything in the service the whole time. I mean, you know, which it was led by various people in the congregation. There was a young man came up and gave his credo, a very unlikely looking person to listen to, someone who was giving you a credo.
You were sure he had a bike outside, right? Like a big hog
Something. It was like, oh my, you know, and you know, all your little judgments going off, and like, and he just gave this beautiful thing about the power of compassion, and it was like, wow. So shut my mouth. And then there was the choir that was led by another young woman, not a young woman, speaking from an advanced age, another woman who also made these beautiful tapestries, you know, that represent their congregation. This chalice with multicolored flames. It was gorgeous. And I do have some pictures on my phone. It was very egalitarian. It was like, okay, it's like the round table. I guess that's how I feel about it. In other words, they made a round table so there's no head. And to me, Unitarian Universalism is this round table. There is no one who is better than anyone else, even if someone's a little clumsy at saying what needs to be heard. And so we heard, you know, various things. They did the needs and blessings. Somebody else did that. There were, what would you say, John? Half a dozen people
Oh, in the congregation?
that did some kind of presentation.
Yeah, probably.
You know, actually very similar to how we began our morning here. You know, each individual person does. Somebody reads the does the meditation. Somebody, you know, lights the candle. I mean, it's the congregation is the leader. It's congregation led. It doesn't have a leader top down. And I think that's the thing that impresses me the most about it.
Is the entire congregation sitting in circles around?
No, they're not.
That's what I'm trying to picture.
Yeah, we're in a circle.
I have, the best model for Unitarianism in the Bible comes from Paul, the apostle in the Corinthians. where he says, when you come together, you know, if anyone has a teaching, a psalm, a tongue, let them come forward, or scripture. Let them come forward and let the others judge. So, you know, that's very, as it happens, thing. So people in that type of congregation would spend the week, you know, meditating on what they're going to bring forward. And whenever I've been in that type of congregation, it's happened a couple times in Nelson, but it didn't last. But whenever it's happened, it was very beautiful because nobody abused it. And the pastor simply sat down and didn't say a thing. So this is an incredible model, and especially because when it says let the others judge, it's not a question of, well, whatever you say is like, you know, not in a critical spirit, but in a spirit of maybe adding to it, clarifying. Anyway, that's my vision of what Unitarianism is.
One of my favorite services was a woman who'd gone on a 2-week silent retreat where she didn't speak for 2 weeks, and she just told the story of what she went through and her search during that, and it just blew me away. It was just fascinating. Her search and her struggle, as it turned out. Fascinating service.
When I was at the Boulder Church, I was moderator there, and we had a lady who had been in the concentration camp, and she made the brass plates that were on our doors, and they were just really beautiful. And my job as moderator was somewhat to plan the programs, and she would always insist that we have the United Nations Day service. And she would call me up about 3 weeks before. John, what are we doing for the United Nations Day? And you know, whenever she was trying to get her way or enforce her ideas, she would raise her left hand with the markings of the, you know, that was her symbol. what the Nazis did to her. And but she got along with everybody. That was the beautiful part. Everybody contributed.
The congregation that Julie and I belonged to in our family in Toronto was called Neighborhood Unitarian. And it was, we didn't meet in a circle, but because it grew from about 40 people to almost 150 in the 5 or 6 years we were there. And we had a U-shaped
semicircle.
Yeah, sort of semicircle that we met. And it was in it was an Anglican church that we bought because no one was going to it anymore. We got it for a good price. But it was also in a East Indian neighborhood, East Indian restaurants and that, and we would go to different restaurants. And eventually we had, someone had a religious person, was a restaurant owner, and they came and did a service, and we got to know more about whose food we were eating. And to me, it's all about the deepening of getting to know each other. And the one thing that I remember is going on a retreat weekend. Unitarian is more than just Sundays. There's always things going on through the week. There's classes and ways to commune. And so this was a weekend, and it was a silent retreat. And I'd never been on a silent retreat. I thought, what's that going to be? And it was people from the church. And it was really very cool how being in silence, and there were times we did talk, but being in silence most of the time, we were dancing and playing, and everything gets heightened, you know, when you're not talking and thinking about what it is you're talking about. And I got to know each other. I got to know the other people better, and I got to know myself better. And I just realized that's really the goal. you know, to know each other and to know ourselves. And usually be surprised about what it is, how we can help each other. How, you know, where we need help and how we can help each other and how to do that. And it's just because that's the way it is, we're built that way, that we have excesses in some areas that other people need that. We need to share it. That's what Unitarianism taught me.
So there's no real basic teaching, like a Bible or something like that.
My understanding, after trying to read through this, and I'm having a hard time I'm not sure if I will ever be able to say Unitarians believe this. Because some of them think that God's a Trinity. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've evolved.
Oh, there you go.
There are 7 principles.
Yes.
And they're not really beliefs, but they're sort of principles. Like the first one is the inherent worth and dignity of each and every person. And so we did them last week. I don't have them to hand. We could read. They're not long.
I can find them on my phone. They're there. We can get them. And it's.
I think the Unitarians would say, why would I limit my learning from one book, from one set of history, from one story? Why wouldn't I believe that within every story, within every book, within every person, there's something to learn? There's a piece of that truth that Ray's talking about.
Wow, it's amazing.
That's the universalist mode.
Yeah.
And that we're all connected. That's the other piece.
Yeah.
That they call it the web of life. And the web of life, for me, is this unseen connection that we all have to each other, to everything. Every tree, every living thing, every animal, everything. And that we have a connection to that, meaning somehow it feeds us, we feed it, we're connected, we're that's what we are. If we're all connected, really, it's only one.
We share the same self.
Yeah. Why would we see anyone other than, why would I not think of another's best interest as my own?
One of the anecdotes of the Unitarians is when a Unitarian dies, he comes up to a crossroads and he sees this way to heaven, this way to a discussion of the merits of heaven and hell, and they always take the left way.
And the thing that I find fascinating, because I even joke about Trinity, and if one spends enough time meditating on concepts around the Trinity, amazing truths well up inside you. Whether they be childhood, adulthood, elder, whether they be boy, man, elder, whether they be in the aspects of divinity. You know, there's so much in there. So the joyful part for me is that I kind of feel like I'm coming home. So why would I say that? We just had an experience of being property managers. And what can I say categorically about where we lived? And some of the folks here have lived there, and they know it's a good idea to correct me when I'm wrong. We created a space where born-again Christians, Wiccans, shamans, Muslims, Sufi, Catholics, Unitarians, all managed to find a way of being neighbors with each other. We found a place where Jamaicans, Irishmen, Scots, Englishmen, Germans, folks from China, Japan, many from India, all managed to potluck together. It was an amazing experience. So, you know, in some ways I have to thank you for allowing me to go and do some of this research, because what it's done is it's helped me find what I already believed in a faith tradition. This idea of an old village where everybody had the same God, ate much the same thing for breakfast, went to bed at about the same time, had a really good sense of what the beliefs and values are, that's the only way you can have a village. And it turns out it's not true. It turns out you can have a village based on the essence behind what all those beliefs are. And for me, that's what I think I found in the history of Unitarianism. And it was really funny because before I came today, I got up early this morning and I went, you need some dates, Ray, you need some facts. Get them all down, get them all down, get them all down, get them all down, get them all down. I went, oh, what are you afraid of, Ray? Put it down. Because the Unitarians that touched me most were the ones who just said, look what happened here and over here, and it seems to have happened independently at the same time. Now, for us, as we start to think about whether we are Unitarians or not, and maybe we can be Unitarians even if we're not part of the community of Unitarians. It's like that kind of thing. We can right now go to the CUC website and a few other places, and you can read all the documents, principles, behaviors, beliefs, things we stand for, things we don't stand for, as they try and say, what are we now? And you can send in your view. You gotta get it done by April 1st. No joke. But there's a way of contributing even now to the framework by which our spiritual life will be held. And even in reading those documents, I think it will help each and every one of us infuse our own community with how we want to step forward. We're past staying where we are. What we do next is up to us. Yes?
For me, from childhood, I was born in Bohemia, and doesn't existed names. I didn't know what is the name for it. Even here in Canada, I didn't understand what does it mean behind it. And so when I was in silence, a number of Vipassana retreats and many different retreats, I always have been the same, that I communicate the most within. And always it was within my heart. But the Catholic priest locked me in the church one time, so as child, and they said, you cannot go to this well, you will be smashed. And I said, allow me to go, allow me to go out. Doesn't matter. It is all in our hearts. And so I walked through that sort of like boundaries of many levels. When I would come to different place, the other place had been bombarded and everyone was killed. That SS man actually saved my life. Therefore he screamed, she have a soul. She didn't put her eyes down. So that they saved me. Therefore next day everything was bombarded. when he did it. So how could I put any name on it? It was not existing name. It was just heart, my heart, receiving and cleaning and connection to my inner heart. And this is why I came to this group. I sensed there is here something that people are permitted to even say how they are.
To me, that's crucial. Being permitted to say how you are. Anyway, thank you. We're coming close to 12 o'clock. Today is it's a tough day for some folks. And there's an invitation to spend time afterwards. So I think rather than going right to 12 o'clock, I think maybe we're going to come to a close. Thank you for speaking on. Thank you for being yourselves. Thanks for coming today. Thank you for letting me find myself amongst you. And I hope there will be some people lingering afterwards as we say goodbye to a friend who's left the congregation. So thanks for coming today. If there was anything that I said or did that means we should go for coffee at some point, please just call me. And we'll go coffee. Or tea. Maybe even herbal tea. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.